So recently I picked up a game that I have wanted for a long time, and you're seeing it here. It is Manx TT for the Sega Saturn, and it may very well be the best of those 32-bit racing games, or at least the best performing that Sega put out, especially when you compare it to something like the original Daytona USA on the Saturn, which is not a great game from a technical standpoint, but still fun to play. Anyway, as I was playing this game, a question came to me. And that is, if you're a collector of retro video games, if you've been playing these games for as long as I've played them, and if you've collected them, in this recent wave of retro gaming, to what degree are we playing games and enjoying them because they're simply nostalgic, and what are the timeless games? And I think there's a distinction to make. I was playing this Manx TT, and because it was a good example of a genre that I liked, and a genre for which I had a certain degree of nostalgia, I was enjoying it. But the fact is, it is a threadbare game. There's 2 courses, 4 if you count the reverse modes. There's just not a lot to do there. It feels like a tech demo, but it demonstrates the technology effectively. So I think if I were to measure this game on just, is it fun to play? Does it offer the player of today anything of true value to them? Will they have fun with it? And I think the answer is no. I think there are just so many better racing games out there that, why play this one unless you grew up in this era and maybe like me, it was the one that you missed. Now, compare that to another racing game, the original Mario Kart, or maybe Mario Kart 64. Those are racing games that are old, the graphics have not aged well, but they're nonetheless a lot of fun, and I would submit that those are timeless games. In other words, I could put a player of today in front of those games. I could put a person who maybe has never played video games but wants to learn in front of those games, and they would have fun. And I think the number of those games throughout the entire history of gaming are very, very minimal. So if we're looking for examples, I say they're very minimal, but of course we can all think of some truly timeless games. The key example, I think, is the Super Mario Brothers on the NES. I think that game, I've lived long enough now where I remember that game appealing to so many different people. When I was a young kid, it appealed to me and my friends. But it also appealed to our parents, and I remember parents playing these games. In my case, my parents would sort of take the NES out of my room at night and wheel it into their room and play it. And my parents were from a generation where maybe they played Pac-Man, maybe, had no connection to video games, they enjoyed it. Handed the controller at the holidays to my grandparents, and they were able to enjoy it. And I won't say recently, but, in the past 5 years, I gave an Ouya, to my friend, and he had loaded up with an NES emulator and had his, I want to say, 6-7-year-old cousin over, and the cousin was enjoying it, as I did and all the other people did back in the day. I think it's a very special game that can do that. Other examples. This one kind of caught me, and, it's not going to have that maybe universal appeal that Super Mario has, but the Civilization series. Particularly, 2 through 4, those games have not necessarily aged well at this point. You're going to want to play 5 or 6, although 6 isn't that popular, I hear, but, that kind of one more turn, that concept, that idea, that presentation, those games, to me, are timeless, and I'll personally take 3. In that series. Another one, of course, is Legend of Zelda. The original Legend of Zelda, I think, holds up incredibly well. A Link to the Past, I would say, is a kind of close second in that series. So those are timeless games. But I think, if I were to pare down my collection and only keep the timeless games, I'd go from about 800 games to, maybe 20. And it's not something we think about, because I think as retro gamers, we'll find something to enjoy in every game. But I think the true benchmark of quality are those games that, despite their age, will appeal to everyone, not just those of us who are deeply invested in the hobby, but people who have never played video games before, people who haven't played them in a long time. So my question to you is, what are your timeless games? Let's get a discussion going.